let's get into what we want to discuss today. Okay. And I think we're going to stay on this thing for a bit because I think it's a topic that requires that we are educated on it so that we don't get carried away by all this bombastic ranging of certain things that happen in history that you're wondering where the person get it from, and they tell you that, you know, there's a book that said it. I'm not going to mention the video that's prompting what I'm about to do right now, but a number of people have been sending me that link. I know the person in question. People have said to me, I don't like to talk, you know, it's not necessary because a good person, but no, you can be honestly wrong, you know. So the conversation, what I'm about to do right now, is actually to respond to what the person said without having to play what the person said, because I don't want it to look like an attack. But it's important that we do this so that we don't get carried away with nice sounding things that are not true. So let's begin with this. Somebody claimed, please, again, this is not an attack, just that a lot of people say, I mean, people from different parts of the world literally sent me that video, and I've seen the video before. I just thought the premise was wrong, and this is how an argument works. If your premise is wrong and your evidence is wrong, you will have no argument. There's no basis for your argument. It doesn't really matter what you say, you will be wrong. The premise is wrong, the evidence is wrong, your assertions, no matter how good you sound, your assertions will be wrong, and your conclusions will definitely be wrong. So somebody said that Odùduwà, you know, was Abraham, and that they had read a book where Odùduwà is said to be Lamurudu, and that Lamurudu was Nimrod, and that was the oral tradition of Yoruba people. So use that as a basis for whatever he said. Now, different people have sent me these things. Some of them haven't spoken a bit. They're like, you go to, is this true? Like, it's very fascinating. And you know, some of these things sound nice. It's not true. And the best thing to do is look at the source the person is quoting. So let's start with the book that was published in 1921. The book is called The History of Yoruba People by Samuel Johnson. Now, what the person said, I mean, again, I like to repeat myself, and this is intentional. Somebody said, why are you always trying to apologize? It's not apology. It is that there's certain things they're going to hear. But let's say that. So here's the book by Samuel Johnson. Again, the book was written in the 1890s, but it was published in 1921. It says here, the origin of the Yoruba nation is involved in obscurity. Like the early history of most nations, in the commonly received accounts are for the most part purely legendary. The people being unlettered and the language unwritten, all that is known is from traditions carefully handed down. Remember what he's saying, no? Carefully handed down. But I say, also, in the name Lamurudu or Namurudu, we can easily recognize a dialectic modification of the name Nimrod. Who this Nimrod was, whether Nimrod surnamed the Strong, the son of Ashul, or Nimrod the mighty hunter of the Bible, or whether both descriptions belong to one and the same person, we cannot tell. But this extract not only confirms the tradition of their origin, but also casts a side light on the legend. So the person read this paragraph. In the name Lamurudu, we can easily recognize a dialectic modification of the name Nimrod. Therefore, he's Nimrod. That's what the person did. We're going to go back a bit. You know why? Because if you want to really study, you don't pick things out. You study what is before that stuff and what's after it, so you understand the context. Where did he get that idea from? Was it from Yoruba people? Now, remember what we read earlier, where the man writing said that the people being unlettered and language unwritten, all that is known is from traditions carefully handed down. Did they hand down that tradition? That's a question that must be asked before we go to town with Lamurudu. I went to primary school and secondary school in Nigeria, and we were taught that Lamurudu was the father of Odùduwà. How many of us were taught that thing in school? If you were, just say yes in the comment section. If you went, it's fine. Say no. Anybody has ever heard the word or the name Lamurudu? Whoever heard it? You heard it before. Lamurudu. Okay. So here's the question. That name and the story behind that name, is it indigenous? Did the Yoruba people have that in their history? Is it their tradition, or is it imported, or was it imported? Let's read the book. There's so much confusion. There's no confusion. Let's stay with me. Stay with me. It says here, the Yorubas are said to have sprung from Lamurudu, one of the kings of Mecca. Tin, tin, tin. Etin Yabo, please stop. I'm not answering any question. Listen to what we're doing. The Yorubas are said to have sprung from Lamurudu, one of the kings of Mecca, whose offspring were Odùduwà, the ancestor of the Yorubas, the kings of Gogobiri and of the Kukawa, two tribes in the Hausa country. It is worthy of remark that these two nations, notwithstanding the lapse of time since the respective localities, still have the same distinctive tribal marks on their faces. And Yoruba travelers are free amongst them and vice versa, each recognizing each other as of one blood. At what period of time Lamurudu reigned is unknown, but from the accounts given of the revolution among his descendants and their dispersion, it appears to have been a considerable time after Mahomet. We give the accounts as they are related. The crown prince Odùduwà relapsed into idolatry during his father's reign, and as he was possessed of great influence, he drew many after him. His purpose was to transform the state religion into paganism, and hence he converted the great mosque of the city into an idol temple, and this Asara, his priest, who was himself an image maker, studied with idols. Then he went on to talk about an Asara, a Brahma, who was brought up a Mohammedan, and so on and so forth. Then he says, the Yorubas are certainly not of the Arabian family and could not have come from Mecca. That is to say, the Mecca universally known in history. And no such accounts as the above are to be found in the records of Arabian writers of any kings of Mecca. An event of such importance could hardly have passed unnoticed by historians. But then, it may be taken for granted that all such accounts and traditions have in them some basis in actual facts, nor is the subject under review. I'm going somewhere. Nor is the subject under review exempted from the general rule, and this will become apparent on a closer study of the accounts. That the Yorubas came originally from the east, there cannot be the slightest doubt. There are many, not even slight, plenty doubts. But let's just read it in Yoruba, right? That the Yorubas came originally from the east, there cannot be the slightest doubt, as their habits, manners and customs and so on all go to prove. With them, the east is Mecca, and Mecca is the east. Having strong affinities with the east, and Mecca in the east looming so large in their imagination, everything that comes from the east with them comes from Mecca, and hence it is natural to represent themselves as having hailed originally from that city. So we're from Mecca, Abi? Not so fast. The only written record we have on this subject is that of Sultan Bello of Sokoto, the founder of that city, the most learned, if not the most powerful of the Fulani sovereigns that ever bore rule in the Sudan. Stop. In the Sudan again. Sudan, not Sudan country. In the Sudan, black land, land of black people, in the black area. This fantastic story was written by the man called Sultan Bello of Sokoto. The only written record we have, the only written record we have on this subject is that of the Sultan Bello of Sokoto, the founder of that city, the most learned, if not the most powerful of the Fulani sovereigns that ever bore rule in the Sudan. Now listen, Captain Clapperton, in his book Travels and Discoveries in Northern and Central Africa, 1822 to 1824, made the acquaintance of this monarch. From a large geographical and historical work by him, Captain Clapperton made a copious extract from which the following is taken. Before I tell you what it was taken from the extract, let me explain. Sultan of Sokoto, Sultan Bello. That's Ahmadu Bello's great-grandfather. He was a Fulani man. He could write. He wrote a story. And in that story, he mentions Lamurudu and other things we're going to read just about now. He mentioned different things about Yoruba people and where he thought we came from. That's what he wrote. So you begin to see something here. The man is talking about traditions. To start with, he's talking about Odùduwà and talking about Yoruba people. What if I told you that not once did Samuel Johnson go to Ife to collect data about the history of Ife that he wanted to write? Why? Because his goal was really to write about Oyo. He was an Oyo man, by the way. Samuel Johnson, don't get carried away by the name. He was a Yoruba man. He had been born in Sierra Leone by free slaves, and then he grew up, took on the name Samuel Johnson, but he's a Yoruba man, right? He was an Oyo man as well. So, to be honest, his book is actually good. Once you can get past the origins of Yoruba people, that thing he wrote is not it. The first, me personally, I break the book into three. The first part about different things about Yoruba people, language, counting, all kinds of things, culture, customs. Then there's the origin bit, and there's the Oyo bit, and the contemporary history of his time. The first part is good. No, 4 parts rather. First part is the customs. Second part is the origin. Third part is history of Oyo, and the fourth part is contemporary events of his time. The first is good. The third is good. The fourth is good. The second is off. And that second is a major problem in our scholarship of Yoruba history. And the funny thing is that people don't even tell you that he, by the way, he was gracious enough to mention where this thing is coming from. People will jump as though they travel to Ife and on go microphone sound 11. Egbenusi mic. Talk about Odùduwà, Lamurudu. It didn't happen. It's a foreign idea. Let's read a bit more. The only written record we have on this subject is that of the Sultan Bello of Sokoto, the founder of that city, the most learned, if not the most powerful of the Fulani sovereigns that ever bore rulings in the Sudan. Again, I've mentioned what Sudan means. Captain Clapperton then traveled across northern and central Africa between 1822 and 1824. And what did Captain Clapperton did? He got hold of the book by Sultan Bello. And when he was writing his own book, Travels and Discoveries in Northern and Central Africa, he quoted a lot of stuff from Sultan Bello, which Samuel Johnson read. How do I know? You talk and hear. He said, the only written record is from Sultan Bello of Sokoto. Captain Clapperton, Travels and Discoveries in Northern and Central Africa, 1822 to 1824, made the acquaintance of this monarch of Bello. From a large geographical and historical work by Bello, Captain Clapperton made a copious extract from the book that Bello wrote, from which the following is taken. Quote, Yoruba or Yoruba is an extensive province containing rivers, forests, sands, and mountains, as also a great many wonderful and extraordinary things. In it, the talking green bird called Babaga parrot is found, a country, and sold to the people of Yoruba, who resold them to the Christians. In other words, sometimes you have Hausa slaves brought down from the north, bought by Yoruba people, and then sold to the Portuguese. The inhabitants of this province, Yoruba, Y-A-R-B-A, it is supposed, listen to this please. Who is writing here? Sultan Bello. He's quoting Sultan Bello essentially. By the way, he's even in quotes, so it's not even essentially, he's literally quoting him. The inhabitants of this province, Yoruba, it is supposed originated from the remnant of the children of Canaan, who were of the tribe of Nimrod. The cause of their establishment in West Africa was, as it is stated, in consequence of their being driven by Yaruba, son of Catan, out of Arabia to the western coast between Egypt and Abyssinia, present-day Ethiopia. From that spot, they advanced into the interior of Africa till they reached Yoruba, that's Yorubaland, where they fixed their residence. On their way, they left in every place they stopped at a tribe of their own people. Thus, it is supposed that all the tribes of Sudan, again, not the country, everyone, all the tribes of the Sudan who inhabit the mountains are originated from them, as also are the inhabitants of Yaori. Upon the whole, the people of Yoruba are nearly of the same description as those of Nufe or Nupe. That's what Sultan Bello wrote. Now let me read what Samuel Johnson is going to say here. In the name Lamurudu or Namurudu, we can easily recognize a dialectic modification of the name Nimrod. Who this Nimrod was, whether Nimrod surnamed the Strong, the son of Assel, or Nimrod the mighty hunter of the Bible, or whether both descriptions belong to one and the same person, we cannot tell. But this extract not only confirms the tradition of their origin, but also casts a side light on the legend. Arabia is probably the Mecca of our tradition. It is known that the descendants of Nimrod, Phoenicians, were led in war to Arabia, that they settled there, and from thence they were driven by a religious persecution from Yoruba, their first permanent settlement in Africa. Yoruba is the same as the Hausa term Yoruba or Yoruba. I'll say this. By the way, if you read a bit down, you see where it was referring to Egypt and stuff. There were subjects of Egyptian conqueror Nimrod and so on and so forth. Here's the point. When the person quoted that portion, it made it seem as though it's Yoruba tradition. But in reality, it's something we essentially took on after we had heard it said about us, especially those who were educated or were exposed. But there's something else he mentioned. He mentioned that Odùduwà was Abraham, and that Lamurudu is the connection, because Lamurudu will be Nimrod. Now, as a young person, I spent some time in Sunday school, and I grew up to teach the Bible as well. So let's go to the Bible. If you're not a Christian here, don't worry. We are reading it to understand people's premise. Genesis chapter 10, I believe. Let's start from chapter 9. We're going to take it to chapter 10. Now the sons of Noah went out of the ark. I'll take it again. Genesis 9 verse 18. Now the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Those names are important. This is the biblical stance of how the earth got repopulated after the Great Flood. Interestingly, the story of the Great Flood is found in diverse cultures across the world, including Yoruba people, right? If you also had a story of a great flood, a great deluge, so it's common to many groups across the world, right? Anyway, so he says, now the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. We'll now jump to chapter 10. There's a reason I'm reading that one. You will understand very soon. Now this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And sons were born to them after the flood. Then he goes on to mention the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai. By the way, biblical scholarship, Europe will be sons of Japheth. Tubal, Javan, Madai, all of them, Gomer, sons of Japheth. The sons of Ham were Cush. He has 4 children. Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Cush is Ethiopia. Mizraim is Egypt. Put is Libya. And then Canaan, making 4. I'm going somewhere. The sons of Cush were Seba, and so on and so forth. Then it says here, in fact, let me read it very well. The sons of Cush were Seba, Avila, Sabta, Rama, and Sabteka. And the sons of Rama were Sheba and Dedan. Cush begot Nimrod. Who begot Nimrod? From what we just said right now, we're using the person says Odùduwà is Abraham. That's their premise. Odùduwà is Abraham. So we're going to use the document they gave us to understand it. This person is talking in the comment section. Please just take a break. So from here, it says Ham had 4 children. Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And Cush gave birth to Nimrod. Cush is from Ham. Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me? Someone says mute. Can you hear me? Okay. I don't know why the person wrote mute. Okay, thank you. Then it says, Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. So when Samuel Johnson was mentioning whether it was the hunter in his book, when he said, let me read this. So that book pointed us to this. So let me read again. It says here, who this Nimrod was, whether Nimrod surnamed the Strong, the son of Asuil, or Nimrod the mighty hunter of the Bible, or whether both descriptions belong to one and the same person, we cannot tell. So he's saying mighty hunter, that's mighty hunter. He says, Cush begat Nimrod, he began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh. Biblical scholars will tell you, Bible scholars will tell you that Babel will be Baghdad, Babel, Babylon. That will be in the Iraq area. We're not doing Bible scholarship today. We're just going somewhere. Stay with me, please. So our Moti Cush be. Cush gave birth to Nimrod. Nimrod's kingdom began in Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land, he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Kala, and so on and so forth. Mizraim, that's Egypt, gave birth to his own children. Canaan gave birth to his own children. Canaan gave birth to his own children. I'm going somewhere now. Verse 21. And children were born also to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder. The sons of Shem were Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram were Uz. I'll explain everything where they read. We're going somewhere. The sons of Aram were Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. Arphaxad begot Salah, and so on and so forth. To cut the long story short, let's jump a bit. My explanation will continue, I promise. If you go to chapter 11, this is after the flood. After he begot Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years, and so on and so forth. Arphaxad begot Salah, Salah begot Eber. Eber lived 34 years and begot Peleg. After he begot Peleg, if Eber lived 430 years and begot sons and daughters, then Peleg lived, and Serug, and so on and so forth. After all this Turinchi, Nahor lived 29 years and begot Terah, and after he begot Terah, Nahor lived 109 years and gave birth to sons and daughters. Then Terah gave birth to Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Let me now stop here. I know that was a long read. I'm going to explain. Let's assume for a second that Lamurudu was real. Let's assume Lamurudu was real. Whose son would he be? Or whose son was he? And his father will be whose son of the three sons of Noah? I'll explain. Noah had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Nimrod's father was Cush. Who was Cush's father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth? Anybody remembers after all this Turinchita in Kalataro? Cush will be the son of Ham. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You are with me. So if Nimrod were to be a Yoruba man that became our ancestor, let's assume for a second, although it's not, but let's say he was. He would be the descendant of Cush, who was the son of Ham. Thank you very much. Now, was Abraham a descendant of Ham? I'm sure you must have heard this phrase before. Anti-Semite. They are Semitic people. That thing is actually from the word Shem. the son of Noah. When you hear they are Semitic, anti-Semite, they use a lot in in the US. Anti-Semite. If you speak against Jews, anti-Semite. The word Shem, Semite is from Shem, who was the son of Noah. So Noah had Shem, Ham, the son of Cush, who was the son of Ham. Abraham was the son of Terah, who was a descendant of Eber, who was a descendant of Shem. How on earth would Abraham, who was a descendant of Shem, be Odùduwà, who is supposedly a descendant of Ham? How can it be the same person? The answer is they cannot. So even when you use the argument, because people send me messages, is Odùduwà really Abraham? We saw it somewhere. Even if you use the person's text, it is still wrong. Odùduwà cannot be Abraham, because at best they will be cousins. Because again, Noah had 3 sons. A broad Bible world, whatever map. What's the best way to say how the world was filled is that Shem fathered folks in like the Jews, the Arabs. Shem fathered them. Japheth fathered Europeans, and Ham fathered Africans. Why? Because of course the 4 names: Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. They were blacks essentially. If we are going by the Nimrod or Lamurudu explanation, we will still be descendants of Cush, who himself was the son of Ham, the son of Noah. Abraham is a descendant of Eber, which is why they called him Hebrew. Talk for another day. Eber was a descendant of Shem. How on earth is the descendant of Cush the same person as the descendant of? They will be at best cousins, because Abraham was the descendant of one brother. Odùduwà will be the descendant of another brother. So that will be Ham and Shem. No, they can be. Uncle cannot be nephew. So they will be cousins. All of that to say this. Number 1, Yoruba are not from Lamurudu. In fact, let me not even tell you. Let me read it from a book. I'm going to go to one of the books I mentioned earlier, A History of the Yoruba People by Stephen Banji Akintoye. Then I'll tie everything together. I know some things sound very nice. Oh, we are connected to the Jews. If you go back in time, Nimrod, it's not true. I don't want to say not lie, but not lie. By the way, you don't need that connection. I don't know why people need that thing so badly. Like, it's a product of inferiority complex, to be honest, especially when it's not based on truth. Umbo. I'm going to read from, this is actually a fantastic portion of this book by Professor Stephen Banji Akintoye. Now, where do we get all this idea of Lamurudu from? In Yoruba scholarship is from Samuel Johnson. Yes, Johnson had gotten it from Clapperton, who had gotten it from Sultan Bello. By the way, if you've ever been to UI, University of Ibadan, that building, that hostel, Company Sultan Bello, was named for this Sultan Bello, the great-grandfather or great-grandfather of Ahmadu Bello, the Sultan of Sokoto. He's the one who came up with this fantastic idea. He didn't even ask us. He just sat down where he was and was like, these people must be the people that left this place at this point and wrote the story. 1822, Clapperton happened on that book. He visited Sokoto. Maybe one day we can even discuss that book. Excuse me. He visited Sokoto, and in writing about North and Central Africa, he decided to quote, as a true scholar, to quote the materials that he had. And the only written document about the origin of Yoruba people was the one written by the Sultan. So he wrote it in his book. Samuel Johnson gets the book and copies it or references it in his own book, and he mentions it, by the way. So I'm not just saying he did it. He said, he told us how he got it. Now, how on earth are you going to use what Sultan Bello wrote as my own tradition? That's his opinion at best. If you want to know where people are from, you ask the people. This man was going to write about Odùduwà. It even visited Ife to ask about Odùduwà, or to ask about how the earth was formed, or how Yoruba people came to be. He just wrote something. To be honest, I'll tell you something interesting. There's something you notice in Genesis if you study that portion. If you read Genesis chapter 1 to chapter 11, there's something you notice with the writer of the book, Moses. Moses was in a hurry to get to Abraham. He was trying to say everything he needed to say. Here, there, here, little here, little there, little here, little there. His focus was Abraham, for good reason, because that's the ancestor. He was trying to get to. By chapter 12, all the history of about 2,000 years was done. He had finished everything from the creation of the earth. In fact, not even 2,000 years, of millions of years, from the creation of the earth to the Tower of Babel. Everything was done in 11 chapters. Chapter 12, Abraham. It's the same thing. It's the same thing Samuel Johnson did. His goal was to get to your history. Everything else was just, let's just talk about how it came to be, and we can just arrive in Oyo. Now, you have to calm down and not just assume that what is said about Lamurudu is our history. It is not our history. Lamurudu does not even surface in Yoruba history. Kosi. We may not have written things down, but we have oral tradition. And in our oral tradition, Lamurudu was not present. And he is not present. And oral tradition is also documentation. It may not be written, but it's documentation. And that's important. And you can't use somebody, a foreigner's thoughts of a person's history as the history of that person. Makes no sense. Let's read A History of the Yoruba People by Stephen Banja Akintoye. I'll go back just a bit. A son of Yoruba immigrants, liberated slaves returning home from Sierra Leone in the 19th century, Samuel Johnson was educated for the service of the church. After elementary education in the Church Missionary Society, CMS Mission School in Ibadan, he was sent for secondary education to the CMS, where he studied from the age of 16 until he graduated at 20 in 1866. He then returned to teach in Ibadan until 1882, after which he repeatedly featured in the peacemaking missions. I'll take that slowly. He then returned to teach in Ibadan until 1882, after which he repeatedly featured in the peacemaking missions seeking to end the wars among Yoruba states in the last 2 decades of the 19th century. That's Kirijo War. The book, The History of the Yorubas, which he started to write in these years, was completed in 1897. That's the one we just read. At the training institution in Abeokuta, he had schooled under a German teacher named Chie Buller, who, while training his students as church workers, gave them a very solid grounding in ancient history, the history of Egypt, Babylon, Greece, and Rome. From such beginnings, Johnson developed a strong interest in the history and mythology of the Middle East. Moreover, Johnson's Yorubaland of the late 19th century was increasingly affected by the growth of Islam and Christianity, 2 world-shaping products of the Middle East. In particular, with Islam came the knowledge of Western Sudanese myth. Again, in case you were not here when I said earlier, Sudanese or Sudan doesn't refer to the country we now call Sudan. Everybody was Sudan. West, East, into Genoa. Delineation, right? So it says here, in particular with Islam came the knowledge of Western Sudanese myth and legends through the writings of Muslims of the Western Sudan, including Hausa land, especially some of the writings of Sultan Bello of Sokoto, which contain some Sudanese myth about Yoruba origins. Above all, the 19th century was in Europe the golden age of the study of the history and civilization of ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptian writings had just been deciphered, and the expanding knowledge of the wonders of ancient Egypt was creating great excitement in the world of scholarship. Why is this important? If you decide to read that book, you will see the part where it was also connecting us with Egypt. Let me quickly say something. Late 19th century, early 20th century, everybody wanted to be from Egypt. And that's why you still see it in Black America today. Egypt is the place where everybody is from, because we was kings and queens. We was all kings and queens. Everybody was, because that was the buzzing thing at the time. For the first time, people were, in the West at least, people were confronted with the fact that Egypt and that it was a great place. So everybody wanted to connect themselves. They were black, you are black. Maybe they became white later, but they were originally black. Somehow we're also from Egypt. We're also connected with everybody wanted to be from Egypt. Egyptology was the rave at the time. So even Samuel Johnson connected us to Egypt. I read that part just a little bit earlier. So he said the ancient Egyptian writings had just been deciphered, and the expanding knowledge of the wonders of ancient Egypt was creating great excitement in the world of scholarship. The writings of the emerging class of literate Yorubas were commonly laced with Egyptian and Middle Eastern references, analogies, and mythology, a practice apparently regarded then as a mark of erudition. In other words, once you begin to say, oh, Kinikon Egypt, Kinikon, you'll be seen as educated. Forget whether there is fact or not. Just connect us with Egypt. We was kings and queens. So he says here, the writings of the emerging class of literate Yorubas were commonly laced with Egyptian and Middle Eastern references, analogies, and mythology, a practice apparently regarded then as a mark of erudition. As a reading of Lagos newspapers of the time will abundantly show, all these influences combined to shape much of Johnson's. The history of the Yorubas, and to account for his linking of all important details of early beginnings of Yoruba history to the Middle East. Thus, Odùduwà became a personage from the Middle East, and Oromion's migration northwards to the Niger country. I'll tell that again. Thus, Odùduwà became a personage from the Middle East, and Oromion's migration northwards to the Niger country became a journey with the Middle East as its intended destination. Indeed, the influence of Middle Eastern mythology pervades most of Johnson's early history chapters, all the way from his preface, which is absolutely true. In contrast, his accounts of the history of the Oyo Empire were assembled from oral evidence he collected in places like Oyo and Ibadan, where memories of the disintegration of that empire were still quite fresh, while his accounts of late 19th century Yoruba history were products of his own eyewitness observations of many of the events. I said earlier that when you read that book, The History of the Yoruba by Samuel Johnson, in your mind, for sanity's sake, you have to divide it into four. The first part, that has to do with Yoruba customs and naming and things like that. Perfect. The second part about Yoruba origins, imperfect. The third part about Oyo history is very good. The fourth part about his own experiences in terms of his contemporary, what happened in his own day, fantastic. But that part about origin is messed up, which is messing up a lot of us as has to do with our culture, because the first written history book for Yoruba people, so we took it as gospel. It's a good book. 3/4 is not bad, right? If you score 3/4, that's still not bad. So he wrote about Oyo, he wrote about what was happening around when he was growing up, and he wrote about Yoruba customs. So, but that origin bit is where and I'm not just the one saying it. Now you're hearing Professor Banji Akintoye say it as well. And you don't have to just hear me say it. Read the book, you understand all these things. So he says here that everything he was writing, especially from his preface, you will see Middle Eastern mythology. But when he wanted to write about Oyo Empire, he collected oral evidence from Oyo and Ibadan. When he wanted to write about what happened in the 19th century, he wrote of his own eyewitness accounts. Right? Fortunately, while much effort was being expended in following Johnson's ideas about the beginnings of Yoruba history, there existed all around us in Ife and other parts of Yorubaland an enormous wealth of traditions as well as evidence in the Yoruba political system and surviving practices and rituals about Odùduwà and his era. Ultimately, a different direction in the study of Yoruba history developed as part of a more scientific study of African history in general, which focused on the indigenous evidence as well as other source material for the reconstruction of early Yoruba history. In other words, what he's saying basically is that over time, we came to now say, if you're going to talk about Yoruba history, we would need indigenous sources, not fantastic ideas from Mecca, Eastern region, and Sultan Bello. We go to the people told me story, the owners of the story will tell us their story. Consequent upon these efforts, Listen to this. Please pay attention. Consequent upon these efforts, we now stand able to lay aside with respect the Johnsonian hypothesis about the origins of Odùduwà and of the Yoruba. All who study the history of Ife and of the Yoruba people are now generally agreed that the great political changes which began in Ife in about the 10th century were indigenous in their origin, in their unfolding, and in their dramatis personae. It is on the soil of Yoruba land that Odùduwà was born and raised. It is only in that soil that his roots can be found. It is on the soil of Yoruba land that Odùduwà was born and raised, and it is only in that soil that his roots can be found. There is no Lamurudu in Yoruba history. We already know where it came from. If you want to ask Yoruba, you ask the people, they will tell you the history, and Lamurudu doesn't exist. I know that I was taught that thing in school. Shout out to my Yoruba teachers, they thought it was nonsense, but they didn't know better, so it's not their fault. Now wait till they teach us, but they were wrong. So I say doesn't have Lamurudu. That's one. Number two, even if it were to have Lamurudu still cannot be Odùduwà based on Genesis chapter 9 to chapter 11, where the three sons of Noah are stated and their own descendants as well: Shem, Ham, Japheth. Descendants of Shem, one of them happens to be Abraham, which is why you call those people Semitic people today, Semites. The folks from Ham, he had 4 sons: Cush, Ethiopia, again, not the country Ethiopia. Ethiopia was larger than that. Mizraim, which is Egypt, Put, which is Libya, and Canaan. And one of Canaan's son, also one of Cush's sons was Nimrod. So even if you say that that is Lamurudu, okay, let's agree, even though you are wrong, but just take it out. You now go to the family tree. Abraham does not exist on the family tree of Ham. He is in Shem. Therefore, he cannot be Odùduwà. Lastly, we won't spend too much time on it today. Maybe we'll have another session to discuss it. If you take our time to read about 2 things, one is called British Israelism or Anglo Israelism. It was a movement almost like a cult, where people believed that as Anglo, and it was British Israelism, then it became Anglo in the sense that it spread beyond the Isles of the United Kingdom, right, the British Isles, so that folks in Australia, in Canada, in America, in New Zealand also believed in that concept of British or Anglo Israelism, where they believed that they were the lost 10 tribes of Israel. 10 lost tribes of Israel. And they had texts for days to prove it. Wrong way, but it's okay. It's pseudo history. It's not real history. Pseudo. It's pseudo history that people now sit on and start shouting that British people are the original Jews. It's called, I think the year was 2000 and must have been 2003. Was it 3 or 4? Thereabout, when I first read of British Israelism. That's why when I started hearing Yoruba and Israel, I was put off. Everything they are saying, maybe they don't even know. It's a repeat of what those guys did. To now make matters interesting, there's another movement called Black Hebrews. You know what? Let's read some things about these 2 guys. No, Israel is real. Israel is real. No, it's actually real. It's real. But it is not, I'm not from there. the whole premise of British Israelism is the idea that after the dispersion, when you had Israel was a nation of 12 tribes, right? From Reuben to Ephraim and Manasseh. And there was, the first king was Saul, and then there was David, and there was Solomon, and there was Rehoboam. With Rehoboam, the country broke in two. You had the north, the south. The north had 10 tribes, the south had 2 tribes. And then you had, the different capitals, Jerusalem, Samaria. And then over time, wars and wars. By the way, the idea of the Jewish idea was not a thing until the breakup of Israel into two. There were no Jews. The concept of Jews came after. The folks in the south were the Jews, not the ones in the north. Someone says, is Israel not Jacob? Israel is Jacob. No, I'm talking about Israel as a nation right now. Jacob already passed on while they were in Egypt. We're using Bible history. All right, so Israel is Jacob, or was Jacob, but we're talking about Israel as a nation right now. So what you see here is that the Jewish identity was not the same. It's not the same thing as the Israeli identity or Israelite identity. If you notice, you hear Israelite. Then suddenly you start hearing the word Jew. Let me tell you something. There's an evolution in the identity of folks in that region. The original identity in the beginning, before they went to Egypt, was Hebrew. It was not a nation. It was an ethnic identity. And the first person to be called that was Abraham. Abraham the Hebrew. You can call Hebrew. So they were Hebrew. They didn't have a nation, but they were developing their own ethnic identity. Then it became Israel. Then when Israel broke in two, you had Jews and Israel. If you read the book of Isaiah, Jews and Israel actually fought, even though they were all Israel. It's like saying, and it's not that difficult, it's like saying that, no, I don't want to use Yoruba people as an example, but you get the point. Like during Kiriji, Yoruba people were in two different things, fighting each other. It happened in Israel too. It happened in Greece, by the way. All these things, that's why people insult us and say, why people used to fight amongst themselves. They don't understand. If you go to Greece, they fought for decades. We fought for 16 years. They were there for decades. One time to be Greek and Sparta. To be Athens and Sparta. Then you see Philip of Macedon trying to take over everywhere. So it's human. It happened everywhere. People who have not fought that kind of war, they are not cultured people. I'll tell you so. I'm saying again, any group who didn't fight those kind of wars amongst themselves, they are not cultured. They did not evolve. They are primitive. They are where we were thousands of years ago. That's how history is. And this is a general thing. It's a general rule of thumb. Whether you go to the British Isles, what happened between the Germanic tribes, the Jutes, the Danes, then later on the Angles and Saxons with the Britons, the Celts, what it happened. Any ancient king, they will have that story, right? That's why people insult you with those things and say, you guys were fighting for 16 years. Your people will not be feeling, why were we fighting? You were fighting because you were evolving. Some say Angles. Yeah, the Angles. So the point I'm trying to make is everybody goes through that phase. So Israel also went through that phase where you now had a division between the north and the south. So the south, right, essentially had Jerusalem as the capital. And then the north, they were changing capitals all over the place, starting from Jeroboam and so on and so forth. Anyway, at a particular point in their history, the north was attacked and it was conquered. They were conquered everywhere. 10 tribes. That's where you get the concept of the lost tribes of Israel from. The 10 tribes were conquered. What was conquered in Yoruba? Dispersion, right? When that happened, years later, some Anglo-Saxons then said they were the lost tribes of Israel. And they had a whole text on these things that I happen to have read almost 25 years ago. And seeing that thing now happen again now makes me feel like some of them already got out of that thing in the 19th and 20th century. Why would you be entering into that gutter in the 21st century to your long? Because of waiting. You want to be lost tribe. Why would you want to be lost when you're already found? You see one very funny. I saw something very funny. Mumbo, Mumbo. So the core tenet of the British Israelism or Anglo Israelism is that the British are the lineal descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And as such, they hold a special divine favor before God. After all, the Israelites were the chosen of God, so they are specially chosen. Okay? They are also connected to they also believe that the British royal family are descendants of King David, which is quite interesting. It's quite interesting. How could they be the descendant of King David if King David's kingdom had gone to the south? So the perpetuation, as it were, of David's dynasty was in the south, not in the north, because Jerusalem was a seat of power, right? The north was just getting all kinds of people. So you had, after Jeroboam, different people were just reigning. That was where you also had Ahab, and so on and so forth. So if you're looking for the seat of David, you'll be looking southwards. You'll be looking at the descendant of Solomon and Rehoboam and so on and so forth. You'll not be looking northward. So you are from the 10 tribes of Israel, but your kings are descendants of David. Never mind that the king, the monarch of England, are from Germany, but somehow they are from David. History doesn't care about real history.